welcome back to Christina Critiques, and this is going to be the this is the second episode, but this will be the first episode I critique other people's artworks, so I'm hoping that goes over well. But firstly, I wanted to say thank you everyone for all the wonderful submissions. I definitely did not expect to get this many on the first week. I was expecting maybe 1 or 2 from people I knew, but I got a lot more than that, and I even had one very considerate person who, unfortunately, I cannot remember their username right now, but they signal boosted this show, and I am very grateful. I will be shouting them out in the description, but, first things first, thank you everyone. That really means a lot, and I will do my best to get to everyone's submissions. Again, I'm going to try to keep these episodes under 15 minutes. I feel it's already very long. I may change that time limit in the future if it proves to be always too short, but for now that's what it's going to be. So jumping right into the submissions for this week, another thing that I have to mention very quickly, any comments I make in this series for any particular piece are not meant to make the artist feel bad or make them feel lesser about themselves or their art. I will be more harsh on certain pieces, and I will be less harsh on other pieces. I will be more critical and take longer on certain pieces, and I will be less critical and take less time on other pieces. It's a case-by-case basis, but again, if, for example, I get your submission and you feel that I lingered too long or over-criticized it, or you feel that I delved too much into it, or I nitpicked at it, you are welcome to message me about any of your concerns, but again, note that this is not to make anyone feel bad, this is merely for constructive growth. So, I hope everybody enjoys, and let's get right into it. So, first one today is going to be this submission. I'm going to go in the order I received them, so if I haven't gotten to yours yet, don't worry, it's in line, it's who comes first. And I have to say right off the bat, when I got this in my inbox, I did not expect to get something so beautiful on the first one. It's a very lovely piece. I was absolutely not expecting something this lovely. The sketch is actually quite nice, and I think it looks really good, and I'm really flattered that you would send me something so beautiful for this series, so I'm very grateful, so thank you. Also, I looked in your gallery, and I noticed this was one of the more lovelier pieces, so congratulations for that. You're a very talented person, and I quite enjoy your artwork. But to get right into the criticism, because this is what the point of the show is, I've already made a pre-list of the issues I have, so I'm going to go over each one and break it down as to why I have an issue with that. Now, the first thing that caught my attention in regards to problematic things I believe you should look into changing was the nose. Now, to break down my reasons why, it really is more focused on the nostrils. Now, I've been doing noses for a while, and note that I'm not an expert, but one thing that's for sure is that nostrils are never this wide or this round, and there's barely any tissue in between. And also, the shape of the nose would mean that from the side, the nose would kind of have like almost a pig shape, and there's very little tissue on the side, so the nose would be kind of like that. Now, I did look up pictures of the actress that you provided me her name. I believe it was Anne Moore. I'm not very sure. I'm thinking Anne Moore, but it might be wrong. She was from the La La Land film. I have not watched that film, but I googled some pictures of her, and she does have an upturned nose. But I would like to point out how even in her nose, as it is upturned, she has a very big piece of tissue here on the side of the nose, naturally. Her nose is upturned, but she still has a space here with tissue. This in-between tissue is very, very important, and she also has this part here with this piece of tissue here. This shape is very important, and I feel that you really did capture her face in your own stylized way, but the nose is so distracting, it really took away from it, because you look at that and you say, oh, well, that doesn't look quite right. So what I would recommend would be to really go in here and expand the tissue around the nose and make it like you would seeing a front-viewed person. Nostrils are never this round. They're more like a oval shape or like a cave shape, if that makes sense. I apologize if my terms are not correct. I normally just say what comes to mind, so it's not always the correct terminology for most things, but that's the closest thing I can think of for this. in this case, you just kind of want to avoid this kind of circle nostril because it really does distract from the face. It doesn't look quite natural. And for this particular piece, I'm not saying that like everything you draw has to look realistic. I'm not saying that at all. I don't think everything has to look realistic or exactly like the person. But in this case, you're going for a realistic vibe. I mean, that's what I'm gathering from the way you've drawn the eyes and the chin and everything looks quite like you were going for a portrait. But then this nose is very distracting, and it's really hard to look away from once you notice it. So again, I would recommend some maybe nose studies. What I basically mean by nose study is that you take some time to just practice doing noses, practice like rendering noses, looking at noses and stuff. A small issue with your lighting, I feel that the way you've lighted this picture doesn't quite make sense. It's like the light's not really coming from anywhere. It's just sort of shaded on the sides and all. I don't know if that's more my perception. I understand that this is a sketch and that the purpose of this is more to capture the face, so I won't dig into rendering too much, or I won't say, oh, it doesn't look finished, so I'm not gonna like it. Again, you don't have to have finished pieces to submit to this. You can send me sketches, you can send me works in progress, I will critique what I see. For this piece, though, I do feel that like it kind of distracts me how nicely rendered the eyes are. Side note, you did catch her eyes very well. They're very spot on. I quite like them. They're very lovely. But when I look at this picture, I think, oh, the eyes are so rendered so nicely. It's like they're quite finished. And then I look over here, and then the rest of her is kind of underdone. I would have liked it if perhaps for the sketch you could have done up her lips a bit more. Because one thing that I see a lot is that people, when they do lip shapes, they kind of make the lips this very solid shape, which isn't really accurate. When you do lips, lips don't have a shape. They kind of just blend away into the face. And it looks kind of odd when you outline them so. But again, like, this is not a criticism of your style of drawing. I just feel like it would have improved it if you more made this piece less of if you had rendered evenly throughout the piece, because like the eyes are very rendered, but then the mouth is not rendered enough, and the nose is quite under rendered. Again, I'm not trying to say that that everything you submit or everything I will say something's bad if it's not finished. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying, like, if you render one piece or one part of the picture, it quite distracts when the rest of it is not as rendered as one piece of it, because you draw your attention to the eyes immediately, but then when you wander throughout the rest of the face, it almost takes away from it, because you're like, oh, it was so beautiful to see her lips like that, and then you're like, oh no, they're not rendered quite all the way. She has quite a strong chin. I feel that in the future, when you light things this way, you could maybe put a dark shadow under her lips, or under the edge of the lips, right where the edge of the chin would be, and then put like a stronger light on the chin. That way, when you look at her, she could kind of have more of a defined look. Again, I feel that if this had just been rendered a slight bit more than what it is, it would have looked much better. Like if you had taken a blending tool. Also, something I see a lot when people do these, when people do noses or do shading on faces, is that they kind of blend at both sides of the face, which would imply the light's coming forward, but then again, like the light on the shoulders and body don't imply that. So again, I would say don't do this unless the light is directly in front of her, because it kind of gives her nose an odd shape and it takes away from the environment of the drawing. I'm kind of nitpicking at this point because I truly do love this sketch and I'm quite honored that I got something so nice on my first submission. But yeah, basically my first few tips are render the rest of it and definitely practice noses. Noses, it's like, let me show you what I did here. So when you look at the first nose, right? You see that the nostrils are really huge. There's no tissue between here. There's no flaps for the noses, and it's really upturned. And if she were to turn sideways, it wouldn't like look right. But then once you fix the nose and you bring it in, and you actually, you know, like let it. If you actually like make it shaped like a frontways nose, the nose looks much better. So again, I would just say practice noses. Noses are quite important. I quite messed up her blending there, but you'll have to forgive me. I'm in a rush with this. But when you do noses, here I've drawn up some noses over here on this side. You have to remember to think of the nostril, which is also very important. Think of the tissue around the nostril, which is this bit here. That's very important. It does not make your character look old, it just makes your character look nice. This bit here, you gotta think of the nostril opening, the cavity, and then you gotta think of this tissue right here. This tissue is very important, especially for her, because her nose is quite upturned, and it's very cute. But that piece of tissue right there is very prominent, which is what makes her face shape the face shape that I think it is. Her nose is probably one of the most important features on her face, so I would say that that's something you really gotta look into. Yeah. That aside, that again, the face looks quite lovely. I know I'm harping on the nose, but that's like the one thing from the picture that really did distract me. I looked at it, I'm like, oh, this is quite lovely, but then that nose, it just kind of, it reminded me of when people go to get surgery to repair their nose, but then their noses get cut open, and then the tissue inside of their nose gets botched up and ruined. And I understand it's a bit harsh, so I apologize for the analogy, but that's what I thought of. Another thing that caught my eye is this shoulder here. Now you'll have to forgive me if I mess up your signature too much. When I look at, like, I'm assuming that she's a quite flat-chested person. I didn't pay attention too much to her bust when I was looking at images of her, but I'm assuming she's quite a flat-chested person. Now, when you reverse the image, I look at this piece here, and I see how small it is, and that would make sense if she were in perspective, but then this shoulder over here is very protruding. It's almost sticking out. So then that means that this breast shape would be like this, and then this would be here, and it's quite small. And like this is much smaller than this, and yet this is super protruding. So, again, I'm sorry for messing up your signature, not my intention. If I were to take this piece, I would recommend bringing this forward, make it more even, and not to make her bustier, that's not my intention. It's just to even out the body. And also, women particularly have a much more sloped set of shoulders than men do. Men's shoulders are about 2.5 heads wide, while a woman's shoulder is about 2 heads wide. So men typically have much broader, more upright shoulders. So I would recommend, like here you made the shoulder quite lovely. It's drooping nicely. It's not distracting. It's quite nice and it looks lovely. But then this one's very under-rendered and it's protruding a lot. So, like, to me that looks a bit odd. So I didn't intend to make her more chest busted. I apologize for that. But to very quickly fix that, just bring this down like that, and I'm gonna have to bring that down like that. Something like that. Not quite perfect, but something like that. You see how the shoulder was like sticking out a lot, and then when you take it away, you see how much, like, how small that really was. And then when you bring it out, you see, oh, okay, now it's the right size. And you can have 3/4 angles where the part of the chest is quite small, but not at this angle, and definitely not that small. So it should be something like that. Again, I'm very sorry for messing up the blending on her nose. I went too far and I went too quick, and it's a little too late for me to fix that now, but you'll get the idea of what I was talking about. Just more blending away with the look that you had there of like the double blend, where it was just kind of like these two dark shadows here. So there's that. Oh yes, right. And the quite a little congratulations. A lot of people give in to this kind of thing where they draw on a really thick neckline, or they make like a really protruding neckline or collarbone, when in reality many people don't have that, and she in particular does not have that. Well, maybe a little bit here, but not too much, and you didn't go for that, and you made like a really lovely neck, so very well done. Yeah, and the rendering issue I think I brought up before, where I mentioned how it was quite distracting, how her eyes were quite rendered nicely and they were just quite beautiful, but then the nose and everything else was like quite under-rendered, and you had drawn into her eyes, but then you wandered down the rest of her and it's like, oh, okay. I'm not saying that you can't render the eyes, but I would just say maybe for the next time, like, render the rest of her too, give her her body the rest of the attention that this part got, give her that nice attention that she deserves, because she's quite a lovely figure. And this is quite a lovely portrait. I'm assuming this took you maybe an hour, 2 hours, and this is quite good for the work of that time. And again, you captured her eyes quite lovely. The last thing I want to address for this piece, for sure, is the hair. Now, I'm not perfect with hair. I want to make that very clear. And again, I realize this is a sketch, so I'm not going to linger on this too much. And if you feel I'm nitpicking, I'm sorry. It's not my intention. But something I feel, especially with people who do hair, is that you're on the right track, mind you. You've actually understand the concept of how hair has shapes in it. When you look at a portrait or a picture, you notice that hair always has a shape to it. there's shapes within the hair that make up smaller shapes and smaller shapes. Kind of like polygons in a game. You realize and notice those shapes, and then you build on top of that to make hair. The thing here is that those shapes are things that you notice, but that you don't render, at least not in the way you've done here. You kept this very hard, bold outline for her hair, which kind of flattens it, really. Like, and she's got the right hairstyle going on, but then when you look at it, it's like, oh, these are these really, like, strict shapes and things. I'm not saying go all out and just make strokes. Absolutely not. I really don't think it's right when you just kind of go crazy and just do lots of little lines, because that's not hair either. But I would say break away from these very, very hard shapes and kind of make smaller shapes, make more free shapes. Like, the way I draw hair, and again, this is not the right method, this is just how I do it, is that I begin with, like, a bang, and then I go in, and then I don't complete the shapes. Like, I begin the shape, but then I kind of, like, leave it unfinished or uncircled. Like, I begin a shape, and then I create the shape, but I don't, like, completely outline it and look at these big, bold lines around it. Because what happens is that it creates this feeling that the hair isn't hair. It creates this feeling of the hair being, like this plastic. Have you ever seen Barbie hair that's not really hair? It's just kind of like a plastic mold of a hairstyle. And she has, like, these really bold shapes in them, but then they're not really hair. They're just kind of there. And again, I understand this was a sketch and that the intention of this was more to capture her face, but I feel like if you had gone in with the hair and really rendered it, or at least gone in and kind of just roughly brushed out the hair, that it would have added much more to her face, because then you bring in that power and you center in on her face. In general, I feel these very bold outlines, like this, and these, that kind of just flattens it. And in this case, you're going for a really nice portrait, so I would have like taken these away. Like, I would have taken this and really gotten rid of these black lines. They don't really need to be there. You can easily get rid of them, and if you just rendered the hair a bit more, you would really bring it out more than what you have here. But again, that's just how I see it. Also, because her hair is quite light, it's a light of like orange and a really peachy blonde. It's quite lovely. You don't want to flatten it with these really dark lines outlining the hair. You want to bring it out. You want to make people look at it and be like, wow, it's so pretty. It just lightens up her whole face. Something like that. Of course, the way I'm doing it right now is very rushed. I will try and do a little more of a rendered version once I return this picture to you. What I will be doing for all of these critiqued posts is that I will be putting them up on my Tumblr. I will respond to your post while approving the post to go onto my Tumblr with this help sheet that I'm making right here. I call these help sheets because I feel it's just more like me kind of like marking on top of your work, which I understand is a little annoying, but that's just my method for critique. So yeah, the main thing that I would absolutely focus on is just doing nose studies. I feel that if you took the time to like do some nose studies, especially for this person, that it would really bring out the face more. It would bring out what you're trying to do more, and it would be less distracting. Because here, this like I could dismiss almost everything else except the shoulder, but the nose just drew my attention in, and that's something you really do have to correct and study. I have a video that I'm going to leave in the description that goes over how to make noses and how to study them and how to correct the shape better. So I'll leave that for you so you can watch that. Now, I've realized that I've gone over 15 minutes by a lot, so I have one other piece I wanted to critique today, but I'll have to leave that for another episode. So thank you all for watching. I'm very sorry to the person I missed out. I will get to your piece in the next episode. These just take a while, so please stay tuned. I hope you all had a wonderful day, and I hope the tips I gave were helpful. See you all next time.